afterward they that are Christ's at his coming.
He said, but every man in his own order. Jesus, the first fruit. He said, and afterwards, they that had Christ is at his coming. And he's coming on the Day of Atonement in the year of Pentecost. And he is going to get him some more first fruits. Go ahead. Then what happens?
Then cometh the end. He shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father.
Because what the Lord is going to do, we're going to see. He's going to set up a kingdom here on this earth. That's the day of rest. 1,000 years of nothing but peace. He said, and then cometh the end when he's going to deliver up the kingdom to God, even the Father. Because then the Father's going to be here on the earth. Go ahead.
When he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power.
Drop down to verse number 51. Go ahead. Listen to what Paul tells us here.
Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep.
What?
But we shall all be changed.
He said, look, I'm going to tell you about something. He said, we're not all going to die. Not everybody's going to be dead when the Lord makes his second coming. He said, but we're going to all be changed. And the all that he's talking about are God's servants that are living when he makes his second coming. What's going to happen?
In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye.
Notice when?
At the last trumpet.
Go ahead.
For the trumpet shall sound. And the dead shall be raised incorruptible.
What?
And we shall be changed.
He said, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, the seventh trump. And that's what the memorial of the blowing of the trumpets represents. God is using trumpets to announce in his taking over the world. He said, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound. It's going to be on the Day of Atonement, in the year of Pentecost. He said, and the dead is going to be raised incorruptible, and we're going to be changed. Turn over to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Jesus was the first fruits, and there are more to follow. But before again, we look at that turnover, before we look at those that are to follow, we're going to look at the last of God's holy day. 23, and pick it up at verse number 33. Because you started with the Passover, then you had the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And in the 7th month, you had the memorial of the blowing of the trumpet. On the first day of the month, and on the 10th day of the month, you had the Day of Atonement. Drop down to verse number 33. Go ahead.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying,
what?
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord.
Also known as the end gathering. It says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for how long? For 7 days unto the Lord. Go ahead.
On the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein.
You can cook on that day. Go ahead.
7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you. Now
the Lord is introducing something new here. Because when he came to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, what happened? You feasted for 7 days unto the Lord. You had a holy convocation on the first day. You had a holy convocation on the 7th day. But here it says 7 days you're going to offer an offering made by fire. You don't do that anymore again because Jesus was God's ultimate sacrifice. He said, but on the 8th day, you're going to have a holy convocation, a holy gathering. Go ahead.
And ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly.
Go ahead.
And ye shall do no servile work therein.
Drop down to verse number 39. Because again, now he's introduced something new. Now you're going to have a holy convocation on the what? On the 8th day. So he's not going back. Generally, you go from 1 to 7 and you repeat it all over again. But now he's introduced something new into the equation. We're going to see what it is. Drop down to verse number 39 and go ahead.
Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days.
What?
On the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath.
And again, this is the Feast of Tabernacles, is also known as the Feast of the Ingathering. He said on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gathered in the fruit of the land, you're going to keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first day, it's going to be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. Go ahead.
And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. And ye shall keep it a feast unto the Lord 7 days in the year.
Go ahead.
It shall be a statute forever in your generations.
And what are they to do?
Ye shall celebrate it in the 7th month. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths.
So you're going to dwell in the tabernacles, a place to dwell. He said you're going to dwell in booths 7 days. All that are all that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths. Why is that? Go ahead.
That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths. And I brought them out of the land of Egypt.
A temporary place. He said that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths temporarily. He said when I brought them up out of the land in Egypt, before he took them where? Into the promised land. Go ahead.
And Moses declared unto the children of Israel the feast of the Lord.
Turn over to Matthew, the 24th chapter. Because the end gathering is when the Lord is going to gather his people physically and spiritually. As I said, the memorial of the blowing of the trumpets announces what God is going to do in the end. It announces the coming of the Lord, going to war, the assembling of the people. And Jesus is going to tell us what's going to take place when he makes his second coming. 24, pick it up at verse number 29. 24 and 29. Tell you what, read verse number 3. Read verse number 3. Because Jesus is going to answer a question that's specifically asked of him by his disciples. And what is that question?
And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying,
what?
Tell us, when shall these things be?
He was talking about concerning the destruction of the temple that he had told them about previously. But go ahead.
And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?
And that's what we're dealing with. What's going to be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? When I say the end of the world, I'm talking about the end of the world as we know it. Because this world is going to go on, but it will never be the same. And Jesus is going to answer them specifically. He's going to tell them exactly what's going to take place that announces his coming. The sign that one needs to look for. Because they don't have to look for it, because he knew they weren't going to be around. This wasn't for their benefit. They asked the question, but it was for the benefit of those in the generations that these signs came to pass. I'm not dealing with the signs prior to this one. Drop down to verse number 29, because what's going to happen?
Immediately.
They want to know about the sign of his coming. Go ahead.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be dark.
Go ahead.
And the moon shall not give her light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken.
He said immediately after the tribulation, what's going to take place?
And then
you have what's known, you have what's known as the Great Tribulation. 3.5 years. And what ushered that in was when you see the abomination and desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. When you see this religious man move into the temple that's going to be built over in Jerusalem, they're going to stop the sacrificing. But people are going to start the sacrificing again. He's going to move in and he's going to take over. And that's going to usher in what's known as the Great Tribulation, a time that has never been nor shall ever be again. And Jesus said immediately after that, it's going to last for 3.5 years. He said immediately after the tribulation of those days, you're going to have a great disturbance in the heavens. The sun's going to be dark and the moon's not going to give a light. He said the stars shall fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. This is only going to happen one time and one time only. Then what?
And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven.
Because the sky is going to roll back like a scroll, making way for the coming of the Lord. It says, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and what?
And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn.
And
they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
Oh, and they're going to mourn. Because they're going to know at that time that God is real. And what they've been following is the traditions of man. He said, all the tribes of the earth are going to mourn. And they're going to see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Just reading this. When you hear these ministers talking about Jesus can come back at any time, he can come back before I finish this sermon. How can people sit there and believe that? It's real simple. Because when you don't read the book, when you don't have any understanding, anybody can tell you anything. It's real simple. It's easy to tell a man to make up a story and say, you know the Lord's going to take you to heaven. And it's easy because nobody reads. So if you don't read, you can't question. What you're listening to is somebody's philosophy. You might as well go and read Socrates or Aristotle. Ain't going to do you no good, because all that's going to perish. Man and all his thoughts are going to die. None of that is going to bring you deliverance. None of that is going to bring you salvation. The only thing that will bring one salvation is understanding the Word of God and adhering to it. Being obedient to His commandments. He said the tribes of the earth are going to mourn when they see the Lord coming. And what is Jesus going to do? Go ahead.
And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet.
The seventh trumpet. That's what the memorial of the blowing of the trumpets is pointing to. Because prior to the blowing of the seventh trump, prior to Jesus coming, because God does not change. If we want to know what he's going to do in the future, look at what he did in the past. He plagued Pharaoh and he plagued Pharaoh. Until the last plague was God himself. He came and he killed the firstborn of every man and beast in the land of Egypt. God's going to plague men until he comes himself. And he is coming full of wrath and anger. So each time an angel blows a trumpet, another angel pours out a vial representing the wrath of God, until the seventh angel blows his trumpet and the Lord himself comes. He said he's going to send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet. And what are they going to do? Go ahead.
And they shall gather together his elect from the four winds.
Talking about Israel. Because it's a time to return every man back to their possession. It's a time to return every man back to their land. This is the year of Jubilee. This is going to take place on the day of Pentecost. The Day of Atonement in the year of Pentecost. Because you're going to have the trumpet blown on the 10th day of the 7th month. He said you're going to send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. They're going to gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the earth. Simply meaning from one end of this earth to the other. He's gathering Israel. Why is he gathering them from one end of earth to the other? Because Israel is in captivity and will be there until the Lord makes his second coming. Turn over to Isaiah, the 27th chapter. Because when the Lord blows, as an angel blow that trumpet, that seventh trump, God's going to gather his people. It's time to give them rest from their sorrow and their bondage. And the Lord had Isaiah to tell us about this event, when the seventh trump is going to be blown. Isaiah 27. And pick it up at verse number 12. Isaiah 27 and 12. Because he's going to tell us about this same event taking place. What happened?
And it shall come to pass in that day, that the Lord shall beat off from the channel of the river unto the stream of Egypt. And ye shall be gathered one by one, O ye children of Israel. Because
the Lord is going to assemble his people. Because he's taking them back to the promised land. Go ahead.
And it shall come to pass in that day, that the great trumpet shall be blown.
Again, that's on the Day of Atonement, in the year of Pentecost. The sounding of the seventh trumpet says it's going to come to pass in that day that the great trumpet shall be blown, and what?
And they shall come which were ready to perish in the land of Assyria. The outcasts in the land of Egypt.
Go ahead.
They shall worship the Lord in the holy mount at Jerusalem.
Because the Lord is bringing his people back to the promised land. Turn over to Revelation 11th chapter. Because when God returns, he's doing multiple things. He's going to take over this world. Not only take Israel back to the promised land, not only gather his people, but he's going to take over this world and establish his kingdom.